Alright, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. This is going to be lesson 2 of the Ben Hogan Secret series. In lesson 1, we basically talked about all the little secrets of the grip. There's a lot more than that, but we're just going to start there and we'll work our way through. So by now, you guys should have an appreciation for the waggle, even if you don't like doing it, which hopefully at this point you do like doing it because you're starting to see results. I promise, secrets are going to come to you. I got an 8-iron here, got the TrackMan up, gonna hit a couple, and then we'll get started. So for years, I did not understand the importance of getting the grip perfect. And Hogan's 5 Lessons, which originally a lot of you may not know, was a magazine article. He wrote 1 article per week for 5 weeks. That's how he got his 5 lessons, and then eventually converted that to a book. That's essentially how it started. So his intention was for each week you work on one specific thing, and after a week of working on it, you should have enough to move to the next step. After chasing Hogan for a long time, honestly, I think he underestimated the amount of time required to perfect the golf grip, and I think, honestly, it's going to take a lifetime to perfect the golf grip. So understand that you can always come back to that. It's a work in progress, but today we're going to take our golf grip and we're going to start building a stance and a posture biomechanically that allows you to swing the club freely. We're going to study a little bit of Mike Austin. I want to say Steve Austin because the wrestling guy, but Mike Austin was a long drive guy way back in the day before there was a long drive. And he was a big advocate of freeing up the full range of motion of joints so that you could get completely turned and swing through the ball with speed. I appreciate what he taught. I think Hogan kept some of that stuff to himself, especially when he talked about lifting the left heel. But before we get too deep into lesson 3 through 5, lesson 2, we have to start with a basic understanding of what makes a good stance, good posture, good ball position, and good alignment. And the reason I've decided to combine all these, it has nothing to do with the way that Hogan organized his 5 lessons. It has more to do with the fact that they all work together. So one of the things I think Mr. Hogan left out when he was teaching stance, posture, ball position, and alignment was that each element feeds into the next piece. So for instance, if we take a narrow stance, we're going to have to probably bend over more because we're taller. If we take a wider stance, we're going to be able to sit more into our hips or sit in that spectator seat as Hogan talked about. All these things are going to matter because the wider your stance, the shallower your swing. Naturally, biomechanically, you can't help it. The taller you are, the more you're going to use your wrists and hands to flip through the ball. There's nothing you can do about it. It's reflexive. It's as we come in, if we're standing too tall, that's all we can do. Otherwise, we put our back into a weird position, our knee, our ankle, everything comes through very, like, unbiomechanically. So when we're getting into stance and posture, we have to start with the width at which we stand and how close we stand to the ball. Those two things actually interact. Think of it like three pieces of a tripod. If your legs are too far away from the tripod, i.e. they're like this and you're way bent over, notice you're going to have instability. There's going to be a lot of stress on the back end of this tripod. Whereas if you're standing too upright, if you get too far away from this tripod, it's going to basically rock and lean. Kind of attribute this or think about this in terms of like an earthquake. Wider is better, right? Wider can handle more stresses as long as you're assuming that your materials are basically strong enough. The integrity of them is strong enough. So I want you guys to start thinking of the setup as a tripod. You have two legs and then a club. All three of these should be working together and matching your center of gravity, which for the majority of us is going to be here, just around our belt buckle, a little below, a little above, maybe, hard to say. I got a little bit of a belly, so mine's a little bit above, and I would say the majority of people is going to be right around their belly button, which for me is right here. So, my mama used to always say, why don't you wear your pants on your waist? So on my hips, like the old school guys did, hike them way up. So that's essentially where our center of gravity is going to be, is where our hips, the top of our hips start, and then the center of our hips are. Somewhere in there is where we're going to hinge from, which is going to create our tripod. Next thing you have to understand is if you lack mobility or balance, the closer you are together with your feet, the less control you're going to have. The more you should probably stand wider apart. But as we stand wider apart, we limit the ability to turn and for our hips to mobilize. Okay? So each of these elements has to be considered when setting up for stance and posture for each person differently biomechanically. If you've had 2 knee replacements, you're not going to really be able to bend a lot at the knees. If you've had a hip replacement, you're not going to be able to get all that wide. So the idea of stance and posture comes down to what I think Hogan's biggest secret was, which was balance. Hogan was never out of balance. And that's kind of the key when you're hitting golf shots. And each person is going to have different proprioception of their space, their spatial awareness, so they're going to have different balance. I am a compact guy, I'm 5'11". I played basketball my whole life, so my balance is the closer I am to my body. If I get too far away from my body, I don't have that much balance. Whereas someone that played baseball, they might have a lot more balance further away than I do. So you have to consider all these things. Same thing with a hockey player. Their hands are very high. Think of Cameron Young as a golfer. Their hands are very high. They can maintain their balance on skates. They're going to be able to balance perfectly fine with their feet together. It's going to be totally different than someone, let's say, that played football, who's most likely going to take a wide stance. And you see this all the time in the celebrity, like golf tournaments and stuff like that. Guys that are more athletic tend to be wider with a lot more knee bend. Because what they're doing is they're managing their center of gravity with all of their lower joints. Because that's just how athletic they are. If you're not a very athletic person, you might stand upright, something like this. Don't worry about how you're doing it. What I want you to feel is balance. And again, Hogan never really talked about it. He talked about it a little in Power Golf, but that's the thing about Hogan, right? He laid out all the breadcrumbs, but he never told you the secret. So in my opinion, his secret was balance. So as you're stepping over the ball, as you're getting ready to hit it, I want you to feel as balanced as possible. If our hands go too low and we get too bent over, we're going to know it because we're going to want to stand up when we take the club away. If we're too upright and we're too close to the ball, right, all these things are going to basically inhibit our natural ability to swing. So this is how I would like all of you to train balance. I want you to start with your feet shoulder width apart. So this is the first step to training your stance. You're going to come in and you're going to make the longest, fastest swing you can make under control. It'll probably feel about maybe 60 to 70% of your speed. It'll look a little something like this. You might pull it, you might push it. It's going to be a very different setup than what you're normally used to. If you have TrackMan, like I do, notice I hit it about 145. So this is my 8-iron. You should already have a yardage for your particular club. And again, this is not just for beginners. All players can benefit from learning this secret. So the next step, once we've hit a couple, we have a basic yardage. We'll call it 150 is probably going to be a good yardage for me. This is my 170, 180 club during the season. It's probably only going to go about 160, 165 today in this weather. But once you've done your feet together and you have a yardage, the next step is to go as wide as you can. So essentially I want you just to make sure that your feet are at least wider than your shoulders. You don't have to go much wider than that. If you watch my wider is better video about making your golf swing predictable, you've already done this. You can skip this step, but if you haven't, I want you to just swing like this. And again, as hard as you can swing, completely in balance. Should go quite a bit further than your feet together. If for some reason you hit it further with your feet together than you hit it with your feet wide apart, more than likely you have incredible wrist and hand abilities that I just don't have. So yeah, I got 153 there. I bet I could get up to 160 if I hit a few more of those. I haven't really warmed up a ton this morning, but enough to kind of give you an understanding of what we're trying to do here. So from there, you should have two feels. You should have one that's like, I don't feel like I can get a lot of width, and one that I feel like I'm over swinging. Somewhere in the middle of those two is going to be your stance. And understand, as the club gets longer, your stance should get a little wider because your angle of attack should change. And we're going to get into that in just a second. We do have a lot to cover. I try to make these videos as brief as possible, guys, but the amount that there is, you just have to go through it. So with an 8-iron, we'll say our stance is only going to be about shoulder width apart. And essentially, that's going to give us our best bang for our buck. Where as we take the club away, we can get a full turn, but remain in balance, and get a full release without having any slowdown anywhere in the arc. Look a little something like this. And it should be pretty natural after you hit your feet close together, feet far apart. You're going to find just a natural width that your body likes. You're not going to have to think a whole lot about it. Yeah, not too bad. A little pushy there, but we'll call that. These are range balls. If I convert it, yeah, we're saying that's about 165 today. I'll take that. Not bad at all. Normally it's between 170 and 175. So we'll just keep that converter on so you guys can kind of see what it would be with a premium ball versus a range ball. So from here, we have to start discussing angle of attack, how it changes with each club. So in order to do that, we're going to start with our longer club, 4-iron. And understand this is going to hold true, and the angle of attack is going to get even shallower for longer clubs like your 5-wood, 3-wood, 7-wood, driver, etc. 2-wood, mini driver, whatever. As our clubs get longer, our tripod needs a more stable base because we're swinging at a faster speed. That's just as simple as it gets. I'm going to post a picture of Hogan's stance, how it gets wider with each set of club, with each long club, so you guys can understand and you can work on that. This here is my 56 degree. I can take my feet close together and swing pretty much full speed with this. It's much shorter, and I can't generate the speed unless you're Kyle Berkshire. You can generate 120 mile an hour swing speed with a 60 degree. You don't really need to take too wide of a stance with this. This is going to be just inside shoulder width, and you're essentially going to swing this because you want accuracy more than anything with the wedge, right? So we're going to swing this about 60% of our power, so we get a nice straight shot just like that. Now, I can hit this 130 yards all day long, but today all I need is 110. And notice it never left my line of flight. And I think that's the key with wedges and why you really do want a narrow stance. If your stance is too narrow, you might pull it or push it. So just widen it a little from there, but you'll have to work just a little bit to feel that. But again, it's all about the tripod. If our tripod is too wide, we have too much balance. We have no real ability to keep the club on a specific plane and let it do its thing because our body can't move with the club. So in order to stay in balance and let the club swing itself the way that I've taught you guys so far, you have to use your stance width to manage your tripod stability. Okay, so we got a general idea. I've shown you Hogan's graph. I think you understand balance. Now it's time to move into posture and ball position. So posture is all about building your tripod. And I think the biggest thing, hold on a sec. Let me hit a ball here, guys, because the track man's got to keep going. Biggest thing with posture is how we hinge, okay? And I think Hogan had found a biomechanical secret of the hips because he talked to Ted Williams and they understood there's a reflexive chain that the hips work on. That's a lesson that's way down the road on Hogan's secrets, but for this particular piece, I need you guys just to understand that if you aren't hinging properly, or you have, like I do, biomechanical limitations, in other words, I have posterior tilt that I'll never get rid of because I've had my spine cut over 4 times and my back muscles are basically locked in place. No matter what I do, they're always going to be a slight posterior tilt. So I've had to really work on learning to hinge. So that's the key with proper posture, is you have to find out how to hinge. So we're just gonna look at it face on here because the next step is looking at ball position. So the next step will be ball position after we work on posture, but first we're gonna talk about the hinge. So the first thing I want you guys to understand is the hinge, when we start from a perfect position, our hinge is going to be our butt moving backwards and our hips hinging. That's the whole movement, all the way down. Think of it like doing a deadlift, right? So if we were going to be hinging, this club needs to go straight down, straight back up. So everything, when you're hinging, the key feel is that everything is in your glutes, okay? If it's all in the front of your feet like they teach nowadays, you're gonna, in my opinion, you're setting yourself up for failure. I believe Hogan's posture was better than anyone's. And if you've ever seen it, he looks very unathletic in setup. When he takes that club back, I mean, he's got everything set up, ready to go. And the reason for that being is because the body only works certain ways. So it's a chain reaction biomechanically. If you set a club in motion and you have a certain grip on the club, it'll load itself because your body is set up biomechanically to hinge, okay? There's a number of ways to hinge, but from the front, I want you guys to see too, if we're hinging this way, when we're pulling the club back, the right hip is going to go up and back. So it's like this. So it's not just the hinge you need to prepare for, it's the turn, like so. So when we're hinging, make sure, the second piece of it is that your center of gravity is pointed at the ball. And this is a secret that nobody ever talks about. This is one of the main secrets of the golf swing for posture. So here's your drill. You're going to take an alignment stick. You're going to run it down the shaft to the club head, underneath so it fits in your grip like so. You're going to take your grip, you're going to set up so your arms are hanging naturally, right? This is a bit of a long alignment stick, but we'll make it work. And so that the alignment stick is directly in your belly button. This is a perfect posture setup if you hinge from the hips. This allows us to swing biomechanically around our body and not early extend. This is something you're probably gonna have to work at home. But one way I like to work it at the range when I get off is I grab a tee, I put it in the back of my grip, like so, and I just make sure it's pointed at my belly button before I swing. Like so. So now we're ready to go, and we just swing. Dead straight shot. Exactly what we're looking for, very pure. Yeah, that's my neutral shaft lane 90-yard 56-degree shot on frozen ground so I don't hurt my wrist. But anywho, the key was this was pointed at my belly button, okay? If you want, I've seen people take like long tees or alignment sticks and break them and do this drill, but you know, you can always use a pencil. Golf pencils work great. Just have to twist them a little bit and you have the same effect. Just gives you a little more awareness of where your belly button is. So for me, my belly button's right here. If you're looking, boom, now it's pointed right at my belly button and I'm hinged properly. This is the position I need to be in to make the golf swing. Okay? And then finally we have ball position, which this is probably one of Hogan's biggest secrets. In order to show you this, I'm going to show you with 3 different clubs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you have diagrams out the wazoo and 5 lessons, but I'm going to tell you why you did it. So, if you notice, Hogan's stance was always open with his wedges, very narrow, and the ball position never changed. It was always about a ball to 2 balls off the inside of his left heel. The reason for that being is the way that the shoulders are set up. We're going to get into that in just a second, but don't get ahead of me. As the club gets longer, our body, our stance has to get slightly wider, and it has to close off because there's more inertia and the clubs are flatter. So notice here, the club is quite a bit more upright, the wedge, than the 8-iron. So imagine, if you will, the club coming through. As it's coming through, the inertia is trying to send it rightward because it's flatter, so you have to oppose that force to get it back online. With a wedge, we don't need as much of that. It's upright, kind of swinging up and down. It's not quite as much. I gotta hit a shot though real quick, so if you guys can kind of hang with me here before the TrackMan goes away. So this is my 8-iron. This would be a pretty typical 8-iron setup. I'm actually aimed way right now, but that's just so you guys get a really good idea of my ball position and alignment. Okay, so notice with an 8-iron, I actually hit the ground way up here even though my ball was right here. And that's because the angle of attack changes with every single club. Flight laws, or sorry, TrackMan ball flight laws now cover this, but for you guys to understand it, you kind of need to see it. So that was an 8-iron, which has, I think, about a 2 to 3 degree attack angle downward, negative. Whereas a 4-iron, because it has a wider stance, and your foot is pulled back like Hogan shows, it allows for a more shallow attack angle. So maybe a 1 degree, maybe even a neutral attack angle, like so. And notice, I barely scraped the ground here compared to the 8-iron where I hit down on it. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. You can hit down on it if you like. But the secret that nobody understands about ball position and why Hogan never changed it and only changed his stance was because there's physics associated with every golf club that will never change. If you don't adjust your biomechanics, the golf swing is going to change every time. Thus, the modern way of moving your ball position, it works, but not near as well biomechanically as keeping the ball position in the same place every time. So that was Hogan's real secret with ball position. And the second big piece of it was alignment. As we talked, Hogan changed his biomechanics for every club in the bag. If he had a wedge in his hand, he got closer to the ball, he opened his stance and he narrowed it as well. But the ball position never changed. Biomechanically, this is a far superior way of setting up to a golf ball, in my opinion, than the standard way of just moving your ball up and back in your stance and keeping the same width of stance. But just to reiterate, the reason for that is because as the club gets longer, our attack angle gets shallower. Even so much as to nowadays, with a driver, your attack angle is upwards. It's not downwards at all or even neutral anymore. So if we don't adjust for that, we don't widen our stance, we don't open it and close it, we aren't going to be able to manage the inertia consistent. And that's the real secret of Hogan's alignment and what Bradley Hughes and John Erickson call dynamic alignment, okay? As well as Sebum. Sebum talks a little bit about this as well. The idea is we're using inertia in our favor, allow the body to set up around that. So I have an 8-iron here. As you can see, as I align it, my stance closes off just a little bit because that club is trying to go that direction. So what I need is a force opposing that, which is going to be, as I shift into my left hip, that axis is going to allow me to oppose that force to bring everything back online. If I were to set up a little open, it would be fine. I would just hit kind of a big fade. If I set up too close, I'd hit a hook, right? So everything has to be managed via the waggle, as you learned in the last lesson. And our biomechanics, our stance and everything will directly come from that because we're setting up with the inertia in mind. As we waggle the club, we're feeling that the club wants to shut on me. So I close my stance just a little and then I swing. It comes out pretty much dead straight. But just a tiny baby draw. So I was probably just had a little too much of a closed stance with an 8-iron there. Which is fine. I'm not 1000% focused right now. But I think you guys get the idea. So the more this club has the inertia where it wants to go that way, rightward, the longer. Okay, so GoPro overheated there, guys, but we're back on it. So anyway, I have my 4-iron here. I just want you to understand that as the club gets longer, there's more speed, our tripod has to change, which means kicking that right foot back gives us more stability because this is where all the force is going, right? This is why Tiger now kicks his foot back because he no longer has the ability to side bend because of his back fusions. So now he has to swing more around his body, thus the back foot comes back. And that's essentially why Hogan did it. It's kind of a secret. Of course, the older golf clubs had a lot more inertia, so you just needed that stability, and you could feel it with the waggle, which is really what this is all about, is using the waggle to set everything up. So if we waggle the club correctly and we hold it correctly, our grip is proper, our stance and posture just kind of happen. And that's why the waggle is such a secret and why I've pushed it so hard for you guys. So if you're chasing Hogan or you want to learn the secrets of great ball striking, you got to learn the waggle. Anyway, that concludes the second lesson. Any questions, any comments, just leave them. I will hit one more shot with the driver, just so you guys get an idea of why we set up closed with the driver. Hopefully the camera doesn't get too hot on me again. But anywho, so here we are with the driver. I want you to notice that if I take a narrow stance with the driver and I pick it up and I go to hit it, I have nowhere to go. But if I pull that right foot back just a little and widen it, I have all the room in the world now. See, look at all this space. So I can gather the club back to me and I can hit it. So the reason why Hogan pulled that right leg back, and here's the big secret that nobody ever talks about, is so that he could increase his leverage. So let's see what happens. I pull that leg back, and I really increase my leverage. It really allows me to load that right side better so that I can send the club through the ball and accelerate it past impact, which was another one of Hogan's big things. So in the next lesson, we're going to combine alignment, the backswing, for the third lesson, third installment, where I think Hogan's backswing will teach you alignment, because he essentially used shoulder alignment and club face alignment to manage his target essentially in space. So thanks again for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.